The true measure of a great sports car isn't how many horsepower it has, it's how many pounds it doesn't weigh. And nobody does lightweight like the Lotus Elise. These cars exist because Lotus invented an entirely new, never done before in the history of the world, method of engineering and constructing an automobile. And combined, these two Elises weigh less than one Jaguar F-Type, another lightweight aluminum two-seat sports car. So apparently Lotus's work worked. And it's a good thing it did, because otherwise there would be no Lotus today. If you're watching this from America, you probably think this is a Lotus Elise, but it's not. That is a Series 2 Lotus Elise. God, I sound so much less stupid when I have a British accent. That is a Lotus Elise, and when it went into production in 1996, its curb weight came back as 1,541 pounds, which its project manager described as a major disappointment.
However, that overweight pig wound up accounting for almost half of all Lotuses ever built. In 26 years, Lotus made 35,124 Elises, plus 10,497 hardtop Exige and 7,200 Opel and Daewoo Speedsters and Vauxhall VX220s, plus 2,515 Tesla Roadsters.
But success at Lotus isn't measured in units sold, or even dollars made. The only thing that matters there is simplicity and lightweight. And if we rewind the clock back to the early 1990s when GM owned it, Lotus had lost its big fat way.
The Esprit was nearing 20 years old and had ballooned in weight by half a ton. And it was so complex it cost nearly $100,000. And the company's other offering, the M100 Elan, was...
It was front-wheel drive.
The M100 launched at the same time as the Mazda Miata, which cost half as much and was, ironically, styled to look like a Lotus. So parent company GM put its Lotus division up for sale, and it was bought by a man named Romano Artioli, who had just resurrected Bugatti with the EB110. To bring Lotus back to the simplicity and purity of the legendary Seven, the Lotus design department went to work on a new step-in car. Like the Seven, it would have no roof and no doors, but it wouldn't be a caricature of the Seven. Instead, a reinterpretation of the Seven's simple philosophies. Its weight target was the same 1,268 pounds as the Seven.
There were two main driving forces behind the Lotus Elise, and they were best friends. Chief Vehicle Concept Engineer Richard Rackham springs from a line of transvestites and pirates.
That's not bad, is it?
No, that's an awesome thing. And his best friend Julian Thompson was the chief designer. He does not spring from pirates, but is instead Thai royalty. Anyway, the boys share their love of Ducatis, and so they wanted their new open-air Lotus sports car to give the exhilaration of a motorcycle.
Unfortunately, safety regulations got in the way. Either the step-over height had to be lowered to the point where the thing looked like a beach buggy, or the car needed running boards like a pickup truck. Or it could just have doors, which of course would then have to be Gullwing doors because designers always love Gullwing doors.
Ultimately, logic and lightness prevailed, and so the Elise got conventional doors. Its styling was unconventional. Unconventional. Ta-da!
If you're wondering where the Series 1 Elise's looks come from, look no further than the Ferrari 246 Dino. Julian Thompson owns one, and it's safe to say it served as an inspiration.
Anyway, real doors meant real windows, which meant real window mechanisms, which meant you might as well just put a roof on the thing, and that meant that Lotus engineers were going to have a hell of a time hitting that weight target. And here's an anecdote to explain just how important weight and simplicity is to Lotus engineers. A bunch of them were on a management retreat, and they had a challenge to design and build this structure using a minimal amount of materials. And at the end of day one, they had to submit their materials proposal to management, who just shook their head and said it's totally impossible. It's a third the amount of stuff that anyone's ever used to do this before. Lotus engineers think about things differently, And when they started thinking about aluminum, they reverted to childhood and started playing with extrusions.
Just like your fun factory lets you make fun shapes out of Play-Doh, aluminum can be squeezed through openings of various sizes and shapes. Press the metal through complicated openings, cut it in slices, and you have things like the Elises' patented and gorgeous pedal assembly, or the impossibly elegant door hinges, or just a tasty snack.
Extruded parts use only the material they need for the strength they require, so they're really light. And Lotus's next breakthrough was bonding those together. Prior to the Lotus Elise, cars were either riveted or screwed or welded together. But Lotus worked together with an aeronautics company to develop an adhesive that was incredibly strong, but retained its rubber-like elasticity when it was stressed, rather than shattering.
The glued joints were stronger than welds because the bonding surface was far larger and more consistent. Moreover, welding thin metal is difficult, but not so with bonding, and so the chassis materials could be made thinner. The Elise's entire chassis was made from aluminium between 1.8 and 2.25 millimeters thick.
To illustrate just how much of an advantage that gave Lotus, the Danish company that was extruding the aluminum bits for the Elise's chassis was simultaneously extruding aluminum bits for the Renault Spider, which were then welded together.
That Renault ultimately had no windshield, no roof, and no heater, and yet it weighed 400 pounds more than the Elise. Case closed.
In total, 26 extrusions made up the Elise's chassis, and it weighed just 150 pounds, despite it having structural rigidity on par with the best convertibles of the time. By the way, that is just a hardtop. All Elises are convertibles. More importantly, though, that was 7 times the structural rigidity of the Lotus 7.
The engine was to be the Rover K-Series, which was a 16-valve all-aluminum 4-cylinder that had nothing to do with the Honda K-Series, like the one that's in this car. Ignore that, please. Chosen because it was the lightest of any suitable 4-cylinder powertrain available to Lotus, the K made just 118 horsepower, but it was able to fling the new featherweight to 60 in the 5s.
The car's original name was the 111, named after its internal project code, the M111. But boss man Artioli decided that alphanumeric names sounded anonymous, which was pretty ripe considering he was selling a Bugatti EB110. Maybe he didn't like the fact that the 111 was one more than the 110, huh? Or maybe he just wanted to stick with Lotus's traditional naming scheme where all the names start with the letter E, like, for example, the Lotus Elan, or the Lotus Eclat, or the Elite, or the Europa, or the Excel, or the Eclair, thank you, or the Esprit. But either way, say hello to the Lotus Elise, named after Artioli's brand new baby granddaughter, Elisa,
who was hiding under a cover for the car's 1995 Frankfurt debut. She survived. She drives an Elise today, and actually she's on the Instas and seems pretty cool.
Anyway, Lotus targeted an annual production of 750 Elises. However, within just a couple of months of showing the car, more than twice that many people had plunked down paid deposits. Uh-oh. Annual production peaked at 5,000 units a year, which is 7 times Lotus's expectations.
And for good reason. The Elise was, to use a word, a revelation. Autocar called it the 8th wonder of the world.
Anytime you see a comparison test where a Porsche won over an Elise because it's a better everyday car, ignore it. That author missed the brief. The Elise was never meant to be daily transportation. It was a toy. It wasn't going to have doors, don't forget. Of course, a Boxster is a better daily driver. It had better be. The contemporary 986 Boxster weighed twice as much as the original Elise, and it cost twice as much too.
Part of the appeal was that the Elise was cheap. Its base price was under 19,000 pounds. For comparison, a 1.8-liter NA Miata was $15,500. So using today's Miata pricing as a yardstick, a base Elise would cost something like $34,000. And yet somehow Lotus earned back its entire initial investment by the time it had made 2,500 cars. The efficiency and lightweight extended to the efficiency and cost.
The Elise wasn't quite so cheap by the time it finally made its way to the US almost 10 years later, but it was still under $40,000 when it debuted in 2005. The Federal Elise was based on this Series 2, which was a huge improvement in quality thanks to changes mostly dictated by General Motors.
GM didn't own Lotus this time, but Lotus was building the Opel Speedster and Vauxhall VX220 on the Series 2 Elise platform. In and of itself, the new car gained just 22 pounds. It rode on the same chassis, but with some 900 new components to increase livability, like roofs that actually kept water out. And it rode better and snap oversteered less, prompting people to accuse the Series 2 of having gone soft. It didn't. In fact, it had stiffer springs and handled even better.
The door sills were lowered by 1.5 inches, which should have made it easier to get in and out of the Elise, but it didn't because the roof also came down. As was before, the only people who can comfortably get in and out of an Elise are young enough to play with Play-Doh. Come here for a second. If I was being chased by a rabid bear who was on fire and had an axe and came up with a wall and had to jump through a hole this big in this location, do you think that would work? Probably not. This is the same size, shape, and location as the Lotus's door opening, and yet I'm supposed to get in this car. I'm now going to play you the official song of the rotund old man getting in and out of his Lotus. This is pretty disturbing here.
Once you're inside, both Elises are surprisingly roomy, and the Series 2 also had such luxurious optional features as power windows, which actually weighed less than the base crank windows. Why, as Lotus pointed out, the manual mechanism was someone else's.
There is no end to the weight savings, and a perfect example is this. This is a tow hook from a compact sedan, and it literally weighs 10 times more than the Lotus Elise's tow hook. This thing looks like a 13mm bolt that's been tack welded to a keychain because basically that's all it is. But Lotus engineers decided this was enough. Now imagine if every part on your car weighed 1/10 as much. Why, then you might have a Lotus Elise.
The Series 2 now had bespoke tires and headlights because after the success of the Series 1, suppliers would actually consider working with Lotus. Suppliers, by the way, that included Toyota.
When the prospect of bringing the little Lotus to the US came up, well, the Rover K-Series engine was out because it had never been certified for sale here. As it turns out, Lotus had a Series 1 that was sitting around in headquarters because it had been damaged by a forklift at the Scottish Auto Show. And at the request of project engineer Roger Becker, the team just dumped in a Toyota Celica powertrain. And it must have rather impressed a lot of people because the rest is history.
The Toyota Yamaha 2ZZ GE is a 1.8-liter 16-valve 4-cylinder monster with an unusually long stroke and an appetite for revs. It made 189 horsepower on its way to 8,500 RPM, and it was bolted to a close ratio 6-speed in
the Celica, the Toyota Corolla, the Toyota Matrix, and the Pontiac Vibe. An 8,000 RPM 4-cylinder in a Toyota Matrix is incomprehensibly stupid. Also, really cool.
But in the Elise, the 2ZZ was a psychopath. The engine weighed 74 pounds more than the high-output Rover K-Series, and safety equipment required for sale here bumped the Federal Elise to the 2,000-pound mark. But it still ripped to 60 miles an hour in just 4.8 seconds.
And that was without the supercharger that was first seen in the track-focused fixed-roof Exige. With 5 psi of boost bumping up the mid-range torque, the supercharged 2ZZ made 218 horsepower, enough to scoot the Elise SC to 60 in just 4.5 seconds.
But the only number that really matters when you're talking about the Elise is weight, because that makes the driving experience of this mid-engine sports car unlike anything the world has ever seen. Modern engine management, structure, suspension, brakes, and electronics
in a package that weighs the same as today's Formula One cars. Pfft. Look, I love the Alfa Romeo 4C and its handmade carbon fiber chassis, but it's 25% heavier than the heaviest Elise. And I would kill to drive an Alpine A110, but it's automatic only, so it's a completely different game, and I would never own one. I do, however, own that Lotus Elise, and it's the benchmark by which I judge every other sports car, especially where steering is concerned. And it's the reason why so few of them ever impress me. I'm not that hard to please, I just have a really good benchmark.
The Elise is the perfect distillation of all of the philosophies that helped Lotus win more Grand Prix than any other company while Colin Chapman was still alive. It is the most successful Lotus of all time, and that's whether you measure that success using a scale or by looking at sales numbers, or most importantly, by driving one.
Okay, so you're just gonna keep the Ferrari framed out the entire time, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Action.
I'm not some rich YouTuber asking you to like and subscribe. Hey, up, keep the Ferrari out. I'm an automotive journalist asking you to like and subscribe. And that's because that's how YouTube works. If you don't click those buttons, YouTube doesn't know you liked what you've just seen and isn't gonna show you any more of it. And if you don't like what you've just seen, well, join the club. And by that, I mean the Hagerty Drivers Club, which gets you access to this award-winning magazine, as well as discounts on amazing stuff. And if you still don't like what you've seen, well, then just leave a nasty comment because that's how the internet works. I need to go clean that up.